So
Okay.
our next speaker, Rajiv Ranjan from Michigan State University. And as we see, his topic is basic Urdu. So Rajiv.
Yeah, thank you, Carl. Thanks for the opportunity. As you can see, it's another open education resource textbook, and I'm assistant professor at Michigan State University in linguistics, language, and culture. I have a PhD in second language acquisition, and I teach Hindi and Urdu. That's my humble introduction to my cohorts here. Wonderful presentation, Mansiji, and those who are listening to my presentation right after Mansiji, you would see that several of her thoughts has been incorporated, and where she divorced from me is talking specifically about the heritage language learners, which in South Asian context is a little bit different because it's like 1800 different languages, and the learners could be cultural heritage versus linguistic heritage. So what she is planning to do is to work on the linguistic heritage, where my book is considering heritage even as a cultural heritage and stuff like that. So there's a little bit, and Mansi is for sure forwarding our field forward. So kudos to Mansiji. So challenges that as I have only lightning moments, and as everybody can see that you can always approach me and write to me. So, before I move forward, okay, I'll send the link of my book later on. And you can also in abstract, you can access the book from the abstract. So the challenge is that I started this project, and this was my second OER project after basic Hindi. And Hindi and Urdu is the same language with a different script, and little bit when you go to the advanced level, the context from the Islamic background and the vocabulary can change, but grammatical structure and everything is the same. It's this, just India got divided in 47 in India and Pakistan, and India does not have a national language, whereas Pakistan made Urdu as a national language. And those who are not linguists or in linguistics training, they do not have this idea that Hindi Urdu is the same language with two different scripts. So the challenges that I have when I thought this project out is that how like the different teaching methodology, but then I also have to see who are my audience, and the audience was my Hindi Urdu learners or Urdu learners and Urdu teachers in America who are not like Spanish. And in the morning, I saw a wonderful presentation on Spanish in group B and how they are promoting more, which is base work is done. Unfortunately, for less commonly taught languages, me, Mansi, and people like us are developing that base. So bear with us if our presentation and our project look very archaic in comparison with the commonly taught languages. Other thing was how it could be friendly at asynchronous and synchronous, because these projects came just right before the COVID pandemic hit. So we were in an aggressive need of the online material, that we are not just scanning things and putting it there. And how does it approach to the heritage and non-heritage language learners? I don't want to waste time on this slide, but what really fascinates me about this definition is its online learning content, software tools, accumulative digital curricula, and there's no restriction of copyright. But we, as the author of these books, we have to go through all this training, and Carl rightly said that the session was really helpful. And I definitely struggled before this OER conferences for last 3 years that we are doing. It has been a challenge for the developers like us. My journey actually started off OER in 2016 when I collaborated on a Mellon grant with Sangok Hong from University of Minnesota, Sunil Bhatt from British Columbia, myself, and Lakhan Gosai. At that time, he was teaching Hindi at Syracuse. And we came up with the Hindi Urdu intermediate level textbook, which is still available online. Link is here. But these are the 3 solo projects that I did. Afterwards, Basic Hindi 1 came in 2021. Basic Urdu came in 2022, and we just finished Basic Persian, which is under the copy editing within our MSU library of OER part of that. And they do the copy editing and check all the copyrights, check all the accessibility and stuff. And hence we have a Basic Persian, which I'm a co-author with my colleague, Nahid Shiran, who teaches Persian language at MSU. When we are thinking about the design consideration, the traditional versus modern, and as I said, we are being as a first author of any less commonly taught languages, at least in Hindi, Urdu, or South Asian, I had to think about how modern I could be. Is my audience ready for the very modern approach of language teaching? And can teaching materials interact with the learner? Because we're thinking about online, and we all understand that how the Zoom, as we are presenting, no one's video is on, and everybody just using their materials at their home. So can the materials interact with them? And can we, what should be our proficiency goal? Can we gamify the situation? And as a SLS trainee myself, I understand the importance of gamification, because in school, the people or the kids learn their Spanish and French and all the commonly taught languages. They have amazing tools and all, but then they come to college and try to learn Hindi, Urdu, or South Asian languages, and that kind of a coolness is gone. So I wanted to add a little bit of a coolness part in that, in this game too. So what I did the mixed approach, and what I believe is a post-pedagogical approach, which does not really define yourself in one pedagogy. It depends on, you can adapt or adopt of whatever the pedagogical approach the certain teacher in a certain context they are. So as the author of the book myself, I wanted to be somewhere vague so that everybody can use a little bit part of it, so that we can have a very solid foundation. With a pedagogical approach, you can see that there's a heritage and non-heritage kind of a style, like top down and bottom up. But in these all kind of Kagan and Dillon's ideas of 2001, they very smartly skip the grammar portion. And in Hindi Urdu, as Mansi also little bit suggested about oblique form, I wanted to make it clear that in a languages, there are interpretable features which makes the sense, or which adds to the semantic value of the language. And that's really okay to teach, in a very communicative way. But if there are uninterpretable feature which does not have any semantic value, learners should go get the fossilized if they are not taught explicitly, or they are not little bit paid extra attention to those things. So with that in mind, I tried to build the book that you can use deductively or inductively, implicitly or explicitly. The little bit of a theoretical background, I came up with the sociocultural theory, which definitely is zone of proximal development. So the chapter progressed in that way. Interactionism, that not only between the speakers and learners and teachers, but between the materials and the learners themselves. And hence I landed up between the socio-interactionist approach of as a theoretical framework of my textbook. The structure is, there are 8 chapters. First chapter begins with the script, which is non-Roman script. So hence it is important for us to kind of focus on that. But 2 to 8 chapters are based on the different themes. And a sample here, you can see that there are the review of the previous section, and then 2 to 3 readings, and a study abroad, because that component was really important, because due to COVID, my learners were not going to study abroad. So I wanted to kind of include some sort of immersion experience. And then there is a follow-up grammar. So if you are teaching in a different modality, you can start with the grammar and then exposed to the input flooding, or you can have an input flooding. And if some teachers themselves want to clarify some grammar points, or some students really want to get into the grammar points, they can also access that part. And there was at the end, there was a cultural notes. You can see some of the pre-reading examples. It's literally task-based, but I kind of cater pre and post reading and listening, and each reading has the video that we have created with the subtitles and all for the accessibility. And then there is a H5P material that you can drag and drop and self-evaluate yourself. And this is accessible on a phone too. So you see that this slide, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of words written there, and then there's a conversational style. And this is to kind of find a in the middle somewhere for the heritage, those who can go top down, and for non-heritage, which can go bottom up. So that kind of I try to mix and match. You can see the recording. H5P gives an amazing tools for asking students or learners to record and share that with either the teachers or advanced learner, or with their kind of language partners in that manner. I kind of gamify the vocabulary too. You can drag and drop, do the true false. And so I kind of, because we have less time, I'm not going much in details, but these are the other topics that we are working, like advanced Indonesian with the collaboration of University of Michigan. I finished basic Hindi, basic Khmer. I helped my colleague, and all these projects I supervise here at MSU with my friend who is a coordinator of less commonly taught languages, Daniel Steider. We are working on basic Turkish, basic Urdu that I finished, basic Uzbek, basic Vietnamese is done, and intermediate Khmer and intermediate Hindi is ongoing process. I wanted to share this analytics that since when I finished basic Urdu, you can see that how many school teachers and other universities teachers are using that, and it gives me every week or every 15 days a kind of analytics on the MSU website. And I'm very proud to share that I have more than 497 visitors, and total page view is more than 1,000. And in the same stroke, if I can share Hindi, which is a year old now, it has more than 3,000 people using this book on a regular basis. I want to acknowledge my OER of MSU team, Asian Studies program at MSU, my own LICTL, less commonly taught language program, and my Department of Linguistics, Languages, and Culture. And this is me. If you want to talk more about this project or kind of ask me any question, I'm here, but let me share the Urdu book link here with you all. So that was my presentation. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
Thank you. So I just want to ask people to write their questions in the chat. And I guess I have a question for, I guess we have a little bit of time for both of you.
Yeah.
And Rajiv, you were mentioning the issue of heritage language learners are a little bit different in South Asia than, let's say, you mentioned Spanish language learners.
Yeah.
So oftentimes people talk about heritage language learners as suffering from a lot of linguistic insecurity. Mansi did mention, of course, the many differences between foreign language learners but is that the case in both Urdu and in Hindi, that they have a lot of this kind of linguistic insecurity?
So let me share my thoughts, and Mansi can add more to that. So my understanding, and there is a paper actually written, Carl, on that by a wonderful scholar of South Asia, Gabriela Nick at NYU, and Surendra Gambhir, and they kind of classified heritage language learners in 4 different parts. So one is linguistic heritage, cultural heritage, and the generational heritage. So what kind of demography we have, at least in Midwest, that I can tell, I'm at Midwest, which could be very different from the East Coast or West Coast or elsewhere. But demography that we have, there are 5 main language family in India and South Asia. And if somebody is coming from the Dravidian language family, for example, Tamil, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada speaker, they have no understanding whatsoever how the Indo-Aryan languages, which Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, Gujarati, Bengali would work, right? So they are cultural heritage, but the Bollywood is the lingua franca in many ways. So they understand somewhat. So they're not only like the linguistically not confident, but they're also most of the time when we do the placement test, of course, like before we place our student, the heritage student, and so typically I would place them in a second year, or 3-4 weeks, they can come in first year and learn the script and move on. But it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. And given that LICTL is so small, we cannot create like a 2 separate stream at the university that, hey, we have 7 students on non-heritage and 7 students in heritage. That will not be cost effective.
Yeah, thank you.
Mansi?
Yeah, Rajiv ji has already talked about it mostly, but then, yeah, I'll just add a little to it that, well, it very much depends on, like, what kind of background they comes from, which tells how confident or in what insecurities they're going to have about their languages. I definitely, since, ever since I started teaching, I have taught heritage track consistently, and then I have students in my class who are very proud that they speak, whatever dialect or variety of language they speak, versus sometimes there's students who are not at all comfortable, or like, they feel like that the dialect they speak is not the right one or is something wrong with it, and then they want to come to the class to learn foreign to learn the formal language.
Mhm.
And the best way to, like in my experience, address that is by giving them acknowledgement that actually all of it is still Hindi, like whatever dialect or variety that they may be speaking, right? By showing them representation of their dialect or their variety in Bollywood or like in literature and so on. And then taking from there, like building on the language. We're in heritage track, the whole thing is about building on what they already have and like starting from where they already are, instead of like assuming that they all come with like no knowledge or like similar knowledge. They do have, I mean, if you compare to foreign language learners, it's very different, but then within themselves they have so much variety, because everyone, there could be some speakers of good, like somebody could be fluent in Gujarati and that's how they speak some Hindi. Somebody could be fluent in Punjabi and that's why they have some Hindi, or somebody could just be fluent in English but then they have some Hindi from their parents
Yeah.
talking in it. So
Yeah.
yeah. So
And even linguistic heritage, Mansi, if I can add, like they
Mhm.
are vocabulary wise, they're okay, but you will see Punjabi speaker adding the Hindi sentence and ending the verb with the Punjabi verb to be. And
Mhm.
and you are a little bit unsure, like should I correct it? Like how far we can do with the zone of proximal development? Is the right time to give a corrective feedback? Or
Mhm.
am I kind of ruining their confidence of interrupting them because
Yeah.
it is meaningful? So most of the heritage student, even linguistic heritage, what they are struggling, Carl, is with the, as I said in my presentation, is uninterpretable features, and my PhD is on uninterpretable features
Mhm.
on language acquisition, not just on Hindi, but across
Yeah.
the world languages. Like how can, like as a second language learner of English itself, I write things, and my wife, who is a native English speaker, she corrects me like one thing, like your article the is misplaced. You never use it when it is required, and you use it when it is not required. But because we don't have the idea of definiteness, Hindi
Mhm.
Urdu has the idea of a specificity, and which does not have any semantic value in our language, right? So those
Mhm.
are the things that learners at the heritage level, language learners, are definitely struggling.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question for Rajiv about, you've produced a lot of OERs. So you showed a picture, a slide of your different
Mhm,
books.
mhm.
And so I wanted to ask about the context of Michigan State then, because I know that you also mentioned you have a Mellon grant.
Yeah,
Um,
so the first book I had is a Mellon grant, but
uh,
so this is the Hindi book that I wrote. I sent the link again. This is 1 year or 1.5 years old. So when OER library started, and I got a grant to write the Hindi book, and then Asian studies, Muslim studies, and all those different centers get really interested. And I was the advocate of less commonly taught languages. And even in this conference, my Arabic colleagues are presenting in group A right now.
mhm,
My Chinese colleague is presenting. So 3 or 4 of us from MSU, those who are working on open education resources. And we, in many ways, we are trying to produce more OER, because in a Spanish kind of morning session, there it is like, I can't remember that, but in one presentation, it was mentioned that how it is also an outreach program, because learners are learning language and it's cost effective. They don't have to buy textbook, but in that way, we can bring the coolness to, like, learners can say like, hey, we don't have to spend $80 or $100 on textbook, and it is gamified, or so in that way, it is like MSU in many ways are leader. And not only that, Carl, let me add this. At MSU, I am also a mentor of Fulbright language teaching assistant, and I
uh,
have 12 different foreign language teaching assistant. And a project that we started is culture. So
yeah.
Hindi culture, and every FLT every year, their job is to kind of write 2 sections for beginner, intermediate, and advanced level in on interactive, interpretive, and production sort of a theme. And at 4 or 5 years, we'll have 12 different book, which is just focused on cultural aspect or on open education resources.
Oh,
And
okay.
we got Title 6, so
Yeah, 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 yeah. So Michigan State's on the rise, and I'm glad that you've been focusing so much on OER. And
Mhm.
I think it makes so much sense, obviously, for the lictal context.
Yeah.
that is underserved by publishing companies.
Yeah.
So thank you for both of you. Our next